Hi everyone, welcome to Tasting History. I'm your host Max Miller, and frankly, it's a little weird out there right now. We are experiencing what is called social distancing, so kind of locked up in here for a while. Stocked up on food, stocked up on toilet paper, stocked up on baking supplies, so that's good. With everything that's going on, I was kind of put in mind of the Black Death. A 5-year period in the mid-14th century where 25 to 40% of the population of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa was wiped out. Yeah. Social distancing actually worked at that time period, but most people didn't do it because they didn't know how disease was spread. Germ theory was like 600 years away. But they did have cures available. Not cures that worked, but cures that they thought worked. So today we're going to make one of those supposed cures, Appelys. Doesn't actually cure anything, but it tastes mighty fine. I'll also look at the system that guided people to think that Appelys, or applesauce, and other foods could actually cure the plague. So before I depress you with the death of a third of medieval Europe, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, tap the notification bell, and hunker down for Tasting History. To our great grief, the plague carried off such a vast multitude of people that nobody could be found who would bear the corpses to the grave. Men and women carried their own children on their shoulders to the church and threw them into a common pit. From these pits, such an appalling stench was given off that scarcely anyone dared even to walk beside the cemeteries. In this atmosphere, I suppose you'd be willing to try pretty much anything that might cure the plague, even if it was just an apple. And that's what some people thought would work. So, today we're going to make Appelys. It's similar to an applesauce, but a little bit different. Now, there are lots of medieval Appelys recipes, some that include suet and beef broth, others cod liver. But with toilet paper being rationed as it is, I've opted for a 15th century English recipe that includes almond milk and honey. For this Appelys, you will need 2 apples, 1 cup of unsweetened almond milk. Now, if you want to make your own almond milk, I'll leave a link in the description to where I walk you through the steps. Just leave out the sugar, because that's a sweetened version, and you don't want sweetened for this. It's going to be sweet enough. 2 to 4 tablespoons of honey, depending on how sweet you want it. 1 cup or 2 slices of grated bread. Now that's basically toasted bread that has been crumbled up as fine as you can. Don't use regular commercial breadcrumbs though. It makes it real goopy and frankly it's not period. 1 teaspoon of sandalwood powder. I also have a link in the description to where you can buy some of that because it's not so easy to find. A pinch of saffron and a pinch of salt. Now I've listed all of the ingredients along with the recipes, both medieval and modern, in the description down below, and the links that I mentioned before. First, fill a small saucepan about halfway full with water and set it to boiling. While that heats, peel your apples, core your apples, slice your apples, and hit that like button. Then put the apples into the boiling water and let them simmer for about 10 minutes, or until they soften. Once you can stab them with a knife with no resistance, remove the pot from the heat and drain the water. Now at this point you have to mash the apples. They don't mash terribly easily, so go ahead and use a blender, or if you have a lot of time because of social distancing, you can just use a mortar and pestle like I did. But it takes a lot of time. Next, put the mashed apples back into the saucepan and add in your almond milk, your honey, the grated bread or breadcrumbs, the sandalwood, the saffron, and the salt. Then put the heat to medium and simmer for about 7 minutes while it thickens. Now while the sweet, sweet aroma of apple fills my house, let's take a look at how the apple could have ever been thought to cure the bubonic plague. Let me start with a joke. Only 1300s kids will get this. The bubonic plague! No? Too soon. Well, if you don't like that kind of humor, how about these humors? Blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Yes, these 4 bodily fluids, the humors, were thought to control everything about your body in the Middle Ages. It was a theory based on the writings of Hippocrates and Galen and corresponded with the 4 elements: earth, wind, and fire, and water if he had ever learned to sing. It was the dominant theory in the Middle Ages and wasn't even challenged until 1543, and wasn't definitively defeated until 1858. 1858! So what exactly did these humors have to do with the plague? Well, if you were sick with the plague or anything at all, it was thought to be due to an imbalance in your humors. And frankly, everything could throw these things out of whack. The weather, the seasons, the alignment of the planets and the stars. So with all of these forces tugging at your humors, how did medieval doctors know which one was out of balance? Well, one way would be your mood. If you had too much blood, you'd be sanguine, so it would be time for a bloodletting. A few leeches will temper that incurable optimism, you little scamp. Too much phlegm and you're going to be phlegmatic, unemotionally calm. An excess of black bile would make you melancholic. And too much yellow bile would make you choleric. So if you were feeling just a little bit irritable, it wasn't because you were going to die in a few days and were in extreme pain the entire time. No, it was because you had too much yellow bile. So what does all this have to do with apples? Well, one way to get your humors back in line was through food. And food fell into 4 categories: hot, cold, wet, and dry. But from there, it got really complicated, because all of the foods were on a degree system, going from first to fourth. First being the weakest, fourth being the strongest. Case in point. Cinnamon was hot in the 2nd degree and dry in the 1st degree. Now, if you had a headache or maybe just a bad day, great, take some cinnamon. But this is the plague, people. We need some 4th degree foods. Mustard. Mustard was hot in the 4th degree and dry in the 4th degree. Who needs antibiotics when you've got mustard? But with the Black Plague, you usually had a temperature and a lack of thirst. Sounds like it's time for some cold, wet food. And I'm not talking Friskies, I'm talking apples. Now, to be fair, apples are wet in the 3rd degree and cold in the 2nd. Not the strongest. But if you want wet in the 4th degree, you have to take mercury. And I'm not going to do that. For cold in the 4th degree, you need opium. And while that sure would be nice if you had the plague, the government's always looking over my shoulder, so I'm sticking to apples. Now, once your apple mousse has simmered and thickened, remove it from the heat and dish it up. So let's give it a taste. That's really nice, very honeyy, not so much appley. Now, not all cures for the plague were this delicious. In fact, some of them were downright disgusting or just weird. So next time, we'll delve into some of the more interesting treatments for the Black Death. But don't worry, we will make something delicious. Candied horseradish, which was a hot and dry food. And while that may sound a little weird, I promise you, it's nothing in comparison with the alternatives we'll discuss. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, tap the notification bell, and join me next time on Tasting History.